Welcome to the Hope for the Journey podcast, a weekday wellness tips program presented by Dr. Denise Marie, Third Order Carmelite. Dr. Denise is a professionally qualified clinical psychologist, health and wellness professor and coach, counselor, plus medicinal herbs educator. Each Hope for the Journey podcast features a well-being key from Dr. Denise, helping you meet your self-care needs for living well. Listener discretion is advised because this and other Hope for the Journey episodes may contain discussions surrounding behavioral health problems and other actual potentially triggering topics.
Hello, and good day, everyone. Welcome back to Hope for the Journey. I hope things are coming along okay for you today. This is Dr. Denise speaking, and on today's episode of the podcast, I will be talking about feeling your feelings, which is a psychological self-care key for living well. As you can tell, I open with an emphasis on the word feeling your feelings, because many people actually do things other than feel their feelings in the face of stress, bad news, other hair-raising life events, and trauma. So I have a question to ask you. Are you a person who ordinarily feels your feelings, or are you one of the people who does any one or more of the following on a fairly regular basis? You avoid feeling your feelings right then and there, consciously turning your attention towards something different. You make a decision to distract yourself from feeling your feelings, to spend some time doing exercises instead. You get on the phone to chat with a friend about other things happening in your life. You are afraid of feeling your feelings and run out of the house to do an errand. You scorn feelings as spiritual temptations toward wrongdoing and make an act of will to banish them with a prayer. Or do you disdain feelings, deeming them a weakness that needs overcoming by some quote-unquote hard thinking instead? If you are one of the people who regularly approaches feelings in one or more of these ways, you are missing opportunity for strengthening your emotional wellness. And consequently, your overall well-being with its various dimensions of wellness. Because your intellectual or thought life wellness is impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, by taking on extra cognitive work that it is not meant to do. Because your wellness of your human will is impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, through more acts of will that are not supposed to be engaged in. Because your spiritual wellness is impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, by over-focus on religious actions that are not matched to the situation. Because your emotional wellness is impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, by feelings being buried alive at an either close to the surface or on a deeper level when they are not meant to be in that situation. Because your physical and occupational wellness are impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, by bodily movements that are off track from the physical movements naturally accompanying the feelings that come up. And by missing the energy it takes to keep your feelings buried alive. because your social wellness is impacted by not feeling your feelings. For example, by relationships experiencing the effects of the suppression of feelings. So, if you are someone who usually approaches feelings in other ways than feeling them, and have been doing so for a long time, and the suppression of feelings has multiplied and piled up its weight, dug down deeper and deeper inside you, you may be on the road to or already have such suppressed feelings show up during your wellness checkup in the forms of one or more of the following: fatigue, body tension, problems with digestion, constipation, diarrhea, migraine headaches, trouble concentrating, anxiety disorders such as panic attacks, phobias, obsessions, or compulsions, sleep problems, unhealthy, scrupulous thinking, depressive disorders and other psychological syndromes such as PTSD, ears ringing, rashes on the skin, chronic pain, hypertension, heart disease, imbalances hormone-wise, diabetes, problems remembering things, autoimmune illness, multiple sclerosis, and more. So you might be wondering, what commonly are the feelings that people might not want to be feeling, treating them like gremlins of different sizes instead of manageable emotive dwarfs that they are, that exist naturally as part of your human makeup. The biggest group of feelings mistreated with suppression are core emotions. Core emotions are higher level human feelings than other kinds of feelings, like, for example, feeling hungry, feeling thirsty, feeling cold, feeling hot. So the higher level emotions are as follows. The first group of core emotions are love and its opposite emotion, which is hate, desire and its opposite emotion, which is aversion, happiness, and sadness. Another group of core emotions are fear and courage, hope and despair, plus the emotion of anger, which is actually quite unique in that it does not have an opposite emotion. But actually, the closest we can get to an opposite experience is the spiritual one of meekness. So another question for you is this: when you reflect upon these 10 core emotions as part of your human nature, which would you say are the emotions that you more or less struggle to welcome for feeling? Which would you say are the emotions that you readily invite in for feeling? Many people have turned one or more emotions into the opposition, especially suppressing the emotion of hate, disliking, especially suppressing the emotion of aversion or shunning, especially suppressing the emotion of sadness or sorrow, especially suppressing the emotion of fear, especially suppressing the emotion of despair, especially suppressing the emotion of anger. Yet, it is a smaller number of people who are treating all their core emotions as allies or friends, and so spend time feeling each different wave of emotion as each wave rises and falls. This is actually the better way, feeling your feelings as they come and go, for human wellness and health. However, given that many people do not realize how their routines of treating certain emotions as opposers have impacted their well-being and behavior, and find they need a wake-up call to change habits of emotional behavior. But all habits die hard, and often it takes the wake-up call of having one or more health problems diagnosed, such as the ones I have listed for you today, to decide that a change in behavior is needed. Did you know that Dr. Wayne Jonas has eagerly spread the news that roughly, quote unquote, 20% of health comes from current medical care? The other 80% is from factors largely outside of conventional medicine. Dr. Jonas describes these other factors as lifestyle, one's behavior, social factors, and he even adds in environmental factors as well. Dr. Jonas and a growing number of integrative healthcare professionals favor approaches beyond only seeking medical services that focus on symptoms of illness. But on the subject matter of this podcast, this means complementary approaches that deeply care also for the emotional wellness dimension in our lives, and care for the wellness dimensions that are associated with emotional well-being that we've already discussed in today's podcast. Approaches that recognize the significant impact on overall human health that deeper suppression of emotions cause. So, more than good but quick advice to just stop running away from certain emotions or fighting with those that have been viewed as opposers, closer, more caring attention to what Dr. Roger Baker and his clinical research team in the UK call one's emotional processing style is the more comprehensive approach to take. For clients or patients who have already recognized on their own and or accepted their medical service provider's assessment that emotional suppression has been at work, identifying one's emotional processing style and trading in unhealthy processing for a working relationship with emotions is needed. Dr. Roger Baker and his research team at Bournemouth University call the work of improving one's emotional processing style a quote-unquote natural kind of healing. They even developed a tool for measuring how well, or not well, you are managing your emotions, called the Emotional Processing Scale. This emotional processing scale is an efficient measure that has already been translated into a dozen or so different languages. So, while deciding to face up to one's emotional mishandling means taking time out for self-care, which might be distressing in stages, it is well worth the effort. It serves your emotional wellness on behalf of overall body and soul wellness. The bottom line on today's podcast topic is this: feelings are for feeling, so later on there is less need for healing. One example of someone who doesn't reveal a behavior style of hindering feeling her feelings is Emma Watson. On the matter of how someone is not able to reveal how one actually feels by crying, Emma said she thinks, quote, "That's actually the saddest thing in the world. It's crazy. It's what makes you human. How you feel, being able to express yourself, being passionate, ... It's what makes you human." I found Emma Watson saying these words for a he for she Facebook Live interview on International Women's Day in March of the year 2015. And an example of a person who no longer has a pattern of hindering feeling his feelings is Brad Pitt. Quote, "I spent a lot of time avoiding feelings, and now I have no time left for that," end quote. Interestingly enough, I found Brad Pitt making these statements for a success story.com article, an article that dealt with the subject matter of emotional intelligence, or EQ. I think you can tell that Emma Watson's and Brad Pitt's emotional processing styles of readily feeling their feelings is something they have determined as a necessary part of living well. In my pondering on which music to talk about today in support of healthy emotional processing, I recalled my own experience when I discovered the song called "Yesterday Once More, Every Shalala" from the Carpenters. That's Karen and Richard Carpenter. For me, the song points out the importance of spending time in catching up with feelings that weren't completely faced and dealt with in the midst of past bad news, happenings, stress, adverse life events, and even trauma. Taking time out to feel through things after the fact, instead of letting them become suppressed with all the potential for contributing to health problems, is a much better way of proceeding. Even listening to this "Yesterday Once More" song can bring up memories that may have been too hard to handle in the past, but can be more readily emotionally processed in the present moment and processed now in a healthy feeling fashion. I think this Carpenter song suggests that it is a good idea to keep short accounts on your emotional processing, not leaving such a task for later what can be accomplished for emotional and overall well-being today. To encourage you at this point in the podcast toward more care for you and especially your emotional wellness, I have the following to discuss: some health foods and plants that can relate to today's psychological self-care key of feeling your feelings. And for sure, each of these health foods and plants is for asking your doctor about in advance of trying to use yourself as the subject of an herb ingestion experiment. I bring up these health foods and plants today in the quest for what I like to conceive of as more emotional beauty. I will mention sage to start as an herb that can aid in the processing of the emotion of sorrow. There is also violet, which is an edible flower that has soothing properties. Also, I would like to mention ginger, which can be used for a bit of a pick-me-up during one's day, whether the ginger is ingested in little pieces or as a cup of ginger tea. All three of these herbs, sage, violet, and ginger, have emotionally beneficial properties, though, again, it is best to talk over these kinds of health foods and plants with your doctor. I am mentioning the three of them here as gifts in nature to be considered on your path toward having a healthier feeling heart. I also have something brief to share with you today, a post-it I have written up to help you not to go forward in life with an emotional processing style of burying your feelings alive. I hope you will take to heart these words from a friend. Ecclesiastes chapter 31, verse 4. For everything there is a season, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn. Next, there is an additional item that I had in my plan to bring up in our podcast today, and that is a phone app, one that can be of assistance in efforts toward feeling instead of putting your feelings under ice, so to speak. This phone app is named Mood Meter. The Mood Meter is used, quote unquote, to build emotional intelligence to last a lifetime, end quote. The description of the app states, quote, it is a gift of self-awareness for yourself and for others, based on decades of research from Yale University. Tell your Mood Meter mobile app how you feel, end quote. The app description also states that, quote, over time, you'll develop emotional intelligence skills that can help you in all areas of life, end quote. Plus, besides this particular phone app called a Mood Meter, you can also keep in mind that there are other directions to help available in our own Hope for the Journey podcast resource center. It is located on Instagram at Cause for Hope. Of course, it pleases me to finish up this podcast today by letting you know how much appreciated is this opportunity to be spending virtual time with you today, especially to share the tips I have about the health-strengthening value of feeling your God-given feelings. And please know that I personally wish you more hope for the journey of greater well-being.
The Hope for the Journey program airs weekday evenings from 7:45 p.m. to 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Instagram and YouTube. Dr. Denise thanks you for listening to her Community Wellness podcast and wishes you to keep in mind that there is cause for hope of more well-being.